I'm joined now live from our Parliament House studio by the Coalition's finance spokesman, Andrew Robb. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Tony. Nice to see you.
You made a $1 billion offer for a single hospital in Hobart to win Andrew Wilkie's vote. Does that represent some kind of record in the history of pork barrelling?
Tony, it was, on his advice, the most important program for his electorate, and in fact for Tasmania from his point of view. He said Tasmania no longer had what was in effect a fully accredited training hospital. It was Andrew Wilkie who said to Tony Abbott, we need a new hospital, the state has not got any money, and we could need up to $1 billion to produce that hospital. And then he proceeded to provide all the arguments why it should be spent there as a priority and not elsewhere in Australia. So he laid out a strong program, and Tony Abbott said that if he helped us to form government, that that hospital would be a sensible investment.
So you're saying, just to interrupt you there, you're saying the $1 billion figure came from him and you just accepted it at face value, did you? Is that
we said up to $1 billion. So
you said, well, you could have $1 billion in that case.
No, we said that whatever it costs up to $1 billion, we have some idea. Tony Abbott has been the health minister, so he has got some idea of what a world-class training hospital, a centre of excellence, would cost to place in Tasmania.
Well, you would have seen what Andrew Wilkie said tonight. He said all that was intoxicating to look at a bit of paper that offered him $1 billion. He quickly came to the conclusion that it was a reckless offer, or almost a reckless offer, to be precise. Do you regret making that offer now?
No, well, Andrew Wilkie had said that this was a fundamental need for Tasmania, a fundamental need, and that he saw it as by far his highest priority, and he would be grateful for the Coalition to consider it. And he knew that we had surpluses to pay, we had savings from which we could pay for such a facility, and that's why it's a little bit odd to hear tonight some of his reasoning and some of the rationale he's given, not only on this issue but in other respects that he's given for now joining forces with the Labor-Green coalition.
All right, let's stick with this issue for a moment, because he says there was no indication as to where this $1 billion might have come from. There was no indication it was part of some normal process to allocate funds. So where exactly was the money, the $1 billion, going to come from? You say it was going to come from savings, but of course they're under threat from Treasury, saying that you've got a $7 to $11 billion black hole.
Well, there's two issues there, Tony. One, that hospital, in fact, any concessions that we seek to make to the various independents who are considering who they would join to make up a government, all of those would be paid out of savings that we have identified through this budget process. And secondly, we reject outright that our costings are under threat. I know what we saw yesterday from Treasury, but we had 3 or 4 hours with Treasury yesterday, and it was very illuminating. What we discovered in that discussion was that it wasn't a question of error of costings. There were simply differences of opinion about assumptions and about whether these numbers should be placed in that balance sheet when, on a couple of major accounts, $6 billion worth in fact, they conceded they were government decisions, and yet, and that there was money in the, and that there was money there.
I'm sorry, I'm not meaning to interrupt your flow, but I will come to that detail in a moment.
You will interrupt it, yes.
I'm sorry, I'll come to that detail in a moment and get a proper chance to explain that. But I've just got to ask you this. It was so important to offer $1 billion or up to $1 billion for a hospital in Hobart. Is that a commitment that you maintain, even though Andrew Wilkie is no longer on your side of the fence, or is that just something to win him over?
No, all of these commitments were done in good faith. We have approached this whole process.
But does it remain a commitment whether he's on your side or not? In other words, if you win government, you're still offering $1 billion to this hospital in Hobart, or is it just a bargaining chip?
No, it was placed in good faith to assist him to make a decision. And I see the government has also offered him money to make a decision. And I can guarantee that if they do form government, that the government will, in due course, increase that amount of money so that a hospital can in fact eventuate.
No, but let's assume that you assume government, because you still might. There's
yes.
every possibility, evidently. Does that offer of the $1 billion for the Hobart Hospital remain on the table? I mean, is that a commitment you've actually made to the people of Hobart, or is it just a bargaining chip for an independent?
No, that was a decision that we took to put on the table. Win or lose office.
So that's now in your costings. Is it $1 billion, a definite guaranteed offer to the people of Hobart for their hospital?
That is now a project which we will factor into our long-term spending program, along with the other major infrastructure programs that we've got.
Is it a commitment?
We've got in prospect.
I'm just trying to understand. I'm trying to understand. Is it a commitment to the people of Hobart? There's $1 billion on offer from your government.
I thought I just confirmed that, Tony. Yes.
Okay, good. Now, you talk about this issue of opinion or interpretation. Did you know during the election campaign the way Treasury operates, which would indicate that they wouldn't accept your interpretation of what you call budget savings?
Well, there's two really categories of differences of opinion, which represent the handful of differences that we had with Treasury. Bear in mind that we put to Treasury 304 policy programs, adding up to $90 billion, right? And in the end, they ticked off on nearly all of those programs. There was a handful left. Two of them amounted to $6 billion of the $10 billion in dispute. Those two were decisions which they confirmed yesterday, and in fact subsequently then put into their paper, added words to say that those two issues were a matter for government policy and that there was money in the budget for those two decisions.
Well, you're talking about the conservative bias issue now,
the conservative bias issue and the question of funding out of some of those range of infrastructure funds.
Well, let's talk about just that one first, because Treasury may have said that it would be open for an incoming government to adjust the conservative bias allowance. They did say that. That's the
right.
Quote. They also said that such adjustments do not realise any actual budgetary savings, and that's the whole point, isn't it?
Well, the fact of the matter is, Tony, that last year in 2009, the Labor government, not the Treasury, the Labor government took a decision to lower that amount of money that's there for overruns of programs. It's a bit ironic given the absolute mess with pink bats and school halls. You know, they are the champions of budget program overruns. They took a decision to reduce that by $4.6 billion, and they did represent that as savings within the budget. Now, in the same way, we said we have decided that we will run programs more effectively than Labor, and I don't think that's in dispute. And we said we reserve the right to reduce that by $2.5 billion. And the Treasury said, well, we disagree with that. And we said, well, that's advice we would consider, but it is a government policy decision. So if we're the government on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday of next week, we would take a decision to lower that concession.
Okay.
Right?
Oh, no, so,
therefore, they
understood.
said they agreed with that.
Well, no, not quite. They said that wouldn't represent savings. And you've claimed $2.5 billion in savings in doing this. Treasury says they are not savings. So in the end, I suppose the independents are going to have to decide whether to believe you and Joe Hockey, or whether to believe the head of Treasury, who they were speaking to, who's given them this information, Ken Henry. Once again, it's a conflict between you and Ken Henry.
Well, it is. If it's a conflict between us and Ken Henry, it's also a conflict between the former government, the now caretaker government, and Ken Henry, because last year the same thing happened, and it was represented, and it did register in the balance sheet as less money required by government for that budget.
Okay.
Now, why does it apply last year? I ask you that question, and it doesn't apply in our case. They accepted that the money was there. They accepted that we had the policy right if we were the government, and yet they still represented that as a blowout. How could it be a black hole if the money's there? I ask you that.
Okay, all right. We've got just a couple more to cover. I mean,
Righto.
Here's another one. You claimed $1.2 billion in savings from the pharmaceutical benefit scheme because of the lower cost of generic medicines. Treasury quite clearly says they'd already factored that into budget estimates. So it's double counting, according to that.
No, it's not. Again, it's not. No, we have got the two reports on which government has based their estimates, and we have dealt with industry. The government took the lowest estimate of returns from that pharmaceutical program. If you go back 2 years, they only booked 500, not the 1,300 that they said they've accounted for. So there are some of these monies have not been booked that could have been booked. Also, in talking with the industry and others who are involved with those studies, they said, one, there's certainly far more profits that are going to accrue to the government of the day, and that drugs like Lipitor and will, in the end, see far more generics come in than have been assumed, and that there will be literally billions of dollars more than is anticipated. We took a very conservative estimate of $1 billion from those billions of dollars over and above what the government will expect, over and above what the government have booked to expect. Okay. Therefore, we are very confident about that issue as well. I'll give you one other, Tony.
Well, we don't really have time to do one other, but I can, just to go out, let's say this, because you've obviously made these arguments to the three three country independents today.
Yes.
How confused are they? Have you managed to confuse them sufficiently that they no longer believe the Treasury's position on this?
Well, again, we had very constructive discussions. We did demonstrate that in all of these examples, except those government decision issues, which we reject absolutely, in all the others, it was a difference of assumptions or the difference of costings grew out of different data, different models, or different assumptions. Now, Treasury said that to us and said in all of those cases, a lot of what we had assumed was legitimate assumptions. Now, when we put all those cases to them and we showed some examples where clearly our reasoning was superior to Treasury's, and that's what came out of the discussions yesterday, they said, and they said again tonight on the other channel station, that it was quite reasonable explanation. Our explanation was quite reasonable, and they were able to feed back to us the explanation we had given. So we stand by those $11 billion. If we are given the great courtesy and benefit of being in government, we will deliver $11.5 billion more in surplus than the Labor Party. We will stop the reckless spending. We will get the debt down far quicker than Labor, and it will be to the great benefit of the community. And
you will build a $1 billion hospital in Hobart, and they'll be thanking you for that, I'm sure. We've got to leave you tonight. We've run out of time. Thank you very much, Andrew Robb.
Thanks, Tony.